I started publishing sermon videos to this channel when COVID hit and everything, including churches, was shut down. It was an effort to continue to reach the members of First Baptist Church of Frederick, Maryland when we were unable to meet, and then after we reopened, to reach those members who didn't feel safe to return to in-person meetings. Over the course of the last 2 years and 9 months, the audience has grown to include many regular viewers who are not part of the FBC family. It's mainly to you that this introduction is addressed. I am retiring as senior pastor of First Baptist Church effective December 31st, 2022. For most of you watching this, that date has already passed. In announcing my retirement to the church, I said that my last Sunday would be January 1st, 2023, which is the date the sermon video is scheduled. It's just cleaner to have my official retirement date be the last day of the year. That way the church and I don't have to deal with a W-2 for one day in 2023. So now you'll all be able to understand some of the things I will be saying in the video. A number of people have told me they find these YouTube messages helpful and inspiring, which is personally humbling and for which I will always be grateful. I'm going to take a break for a few months to let my subconscious kind of learn how to not always be thinking about the next message, which usually starts happening right after the last message has been delivered. There's kind of a stress level that all pastors maintain 24/7 because Sundays come with regularity and much quicker than you realize. After a few months, however, I'll resume posting messages to this channel. The format and frequency will undoubtedly change, but hopefully the things that you find in my messages that keep you coming back to this channel regularly will continue and perhaps increase. Thank you all for your support. I'll see you all in a few months. For now, here's today's message. Harry Chapin was a singer-songwriter in the 1970s whose career was tragically cut short in 1981 when a tractor-trailer hit Chapin's Volkswagen Rabbit, killing him. He's best known for his hits Taxi, WOLD, and the number one hit Cats in the Cradle, which is one of the few of his songs which follow the typical pop formula of verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, bridge, chorus. It's also a radio-friendly 3.5 minutes. Most of his songs were too long for radio. They were too long because Chapin wrote stories that he then put to song, and few good stories can be told in 3.5 minutes. To get to the true genius of the man, you have to listen to his albums, where he had space to tell the stories he wanted to tell within the confines of a song, but without the restrictions of radio. One of his signature songs is Circle. It starts with the chorus. All my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. All my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. The season's spinning round again. The years keep rolling by. And then the first of only 2 verses. It seems like I've been here before. I can't remember when. But I have this funny feeling that we'll all be together again. No straight lines make up my life, and all my roads have bends. There's no clear-cut beginnings, and so far, no dead ends. That's the song that's been running through my head this week as I approached this day and this message. My family and close friends have been referring to this as my last message as the pastor of First Baptist Church. But since I officially retired yesterday, this is actually my first sermon as a retired pastor. But that's officially. I've still been thinking about this as my last sermon. So which is it? Last or first? Well, it's kind of both, which was Chapin's point. We tend to think of life as a straight line. That's how we think of time, which is why we talk of timelines. On the left is a beginning point, birth, and on the right, an end point, death. But it's not that simple, is it? All my life's a circle? Life is a circle. And I'm not simply talking about the circle of life, like in Lion King, where Simba is born and soon after, spoiler alert, Mustafa dies. Or in the real world, where a baby is born in a hospital room and at the same time in another hospital room, an old man dies. I'm saying life is a circle. Your life, my life, Harry Chapin's life, all my life's a circle. Sunrise and sundown. You can look up on any particular day when sunrise and sundown occur at an exact moment. If you're wondering, this morning sundown in Frederick was at 7:29 and sunset will be at 4:56. But that's not how we experience sunrise and sundown, is it? It started to get light before 7:29 this morning, but it was still pretty much dark at 7:31. And it'll be pretty dark at 4:56, but there will still be some light at 4:57. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. Last night, people whooped it up and kissed each other when the clock struck midnight and the ball in Times Square dropped, but I was asleep at midnight. I'm retired, remember? And so for all intents and purposes, 2023 began for me when I woke up this morning. Life is a circle, no clear-cut beginnings. Part of the abortion debate is the question of when life begins, and nobody has a clear answer. Well, check that out. Seems everybody has a clear answer. It's just that everyone has a different answer, and we can't seem to find agreement. And I'd suggest that our inability to come to any kind of agreement is because we start with a faulty premise. Life doesn't begin. It's passed along. A man and a woman join together and each contributes a living organisms that their own bodies formed from living tissue. And those living human organisms combine, sharing their genetic material and starting a process of cell division and eventually cell differentiation and specialization. At some point that no one can agree on, we consider those cells to be a person. But before that point, those cells were still alive. Life didn't begin at whatever moment that point is for you. Personhood began. But even to call that a point is faulty. It's a process. Any given point blending into the next, like the colors of a rainbow. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And so for us as a church family, this moment, my retirement after 27 and a half years, is an ending and it's a beginning all at once, one rolling into the other and into the other again, chicken and egg. And it's going to seem strange, maybe even scary. I mean, think about it. This is only the fourth time in over 100 years since 1916 when Reverend Royal became pastor that the church has had to navigate an interim period between pastors. So, of course, it's unsettling and maybe a little exciting too. Difficulties bring challenges, but challenges focus your attention and concentrate your effort, causing you to cast aside anything that's unnecessary or even a distraction from your main purpose and mission. It may be somewhat cliche to say that challenges are opportunities in disguise, but it's true. Chapin's saying there's no clear-cut beginnings and so far no dead ends. A culture that believes that there is a beginning to life, of course, is going to accept that there is an end to it, a literal dead end. We tend to associate death with the elderly. If the world works the way it's supposed to, everyone lives into old age and then comes death. And if death precedes old age, if it strikes the young, well, that's a violation of the way that it's supposed to be. It's something that's out of the norm. But in the ancient world, and actually for most of human history, and in some places the world has never really changed, but death was always associated with birth. Average lifespan in the Roman Empire was 35 to 40 years old. But that doesn't mean that there weren't any 70-year-olds. The high mortality rates in the ancient world were partially a result of sending young men in their teens and 20s off to the many wars that they fought. But the biggest factor by far was the great number of infants who died at birth and the great number of women who died in childbirth. Dale Martin, who's professor of religious studies at Yale, has written that on average, every woman who lived to childbearing age, normally considered to be around 13 or 14 in the ancient world, had to give birth 5 times simply in order for the population of the Roman Empire to remain the same. Ever wonder why the ancient Israelites waited until the 8th day before circumcising their male infants? It's not because the blood coagulates better on the 8th day. The day a baby boy was circumcised was also the day he was named, and they waited to make sure he survived before naming him. The Romans waited until the 9th day before naming their children for the same reason. It's best not to get too close to a baby who's likely to die. Certainly don't give them a name yet. Our expectation is that the closest our birth and our death will come is on our tombstone. But in the ancient world, the two were closely associated and not in a good way. In Jesus, God removed the sting, the finality of death, by bringing the two together, birth and death, in a life-giving way. Jesus once presented this connection between death and new life through the word picture of a seed. We think of planting a seed as the first step in new life, but Jesus correctly points out that in order for a seed to grow, it needs to be buried. Very truly, I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. He was talking about his own death, of course. In the verse just before, he says, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified." Notice how he refers to his death as his greatest triumph, the time of his glorification. But he's not just referring to his death. In verse 25, he says, "Those who love their life will lose it, and those who hate their life in this world will keep it for eternal life." If you try to preserve a seed by placing it in a jar, it will always just be a seed. But if you want that seed to become wheat that becomes bread to eat, you have to stop preserving it and bury it in the soil. You will no longer have that seed, but it will yield many seeds. If you take those many seeds and grind them, they become a coarse powder. And if you take that powder and add water and yeast and knead it thoroughly, you transform it into dough. And when you bake that dough, it transforms into bread that can be eaten. What Jesus was describing is the process of transformation. No clear-cut beginnings and no dead ends, just seamless transformation from one form of life to another, from life to death to life again, the moon rolling into the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. We see this transformation of life into death into life again vividly pictured at the Lord's Supper. The bread at the Passover meal is unleavened. It has no yeast, a living culture introduced into the dough so that the bread will rise. But yeast isn't all that's necessary to make bread rise. The dough must be kneaded, which breaks apart the randomly connected amino acids in the dough and actually rearranges them into an orderly matrix, which then creates spaces that trap gases released by the yeast, which causes it to rise when baked. So in the bread of the Passover, instead of kneading the dough, it is simply rolled out and flattened, resulting in a dry and tasteless kind of cracker, saltines without the salt. "This is my body," Jesus said. And literally, when you eat it, that's what happens. It's transformed by acids and enzymes and bacteria until it finally becomes a sugar that can be carried by your blood into the various specialized living cells that make up your body. And then it provides you with the energy of life. And speaking of blood, Jesus took a goblet of wine, a drink that starts with the crushing of grapes, and again, with the introduction of yeast, a living culture, is transformed into a drink Baptists have long been against drinking, at least when they're around other "This is my blood," Jesus said, "poured out in death so that you can have life. And since Jesus could not have risen from the grave had he never been laid in the grave, it is blood poured out so that Jesus could experience resurrection and thus pass resurrection on to all who claim his death by dying in him and with him. As Paul says, "For if we have been united with him in a death like his, we will certainly be united with him in a resurrection like his." All my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. Lord, you are with us in every season of transition and change. I pray that as we enter into this new era with excitement and even some anxiety, that we will recall your deep compassion and we will sense your abiding presence and we will be enveloped by your abounding love. We thank you for bringing us together and for the journey that we have taken together. We thank you for the experiences that have brought us to this moment, and we anticipate the ones that are yet to come. We thank you for the work of others that gives breadth and depth to our own work. Be with us as we move forward, rejoicing with you and supporting one another. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.